everybody, welcome to the Jobbing Bandits. It's Oren joining you today. Happy Friday. We made it to the weekend. We made it to Friday, and we're doing this Friday in a big way. We have one of the biggest names in YouTubers for comic books. Let's talk about ComicTom101. He does so much work for his Key Collector app, videos almost daily, all sorts of interviews, telling you what's going on in the world of comics today, what's hot, what's not. So much work he puts into it, and he's writing his own comics now, so we get into that as well. I was so glad he was able to take some time to talk to us today. I think you're really going to enjoy this. Here is Comic Tom 101. Comic Tom 101 with us. Sir, thanks so much for taking the time.
Yo, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I like what you do on YouTube, and I'm excited to chat with you about some comics, some collectibles, and whatever else you have up your sleeves. That's a really cool shirt.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. So let's start at the very, very beginning. How do you first discover comics?
Ooh, so way back when I was younger, I struggled with reading, like any kid does. But also to this day, it's just not something I really enjoy unless it's fiction or nonfiction. Like textbooks I'm fine with, or like reading about history. I can engage and retain. But anything that's like a story focused, storytelling, just something in my brain just turns off. I'll read a page and I'll read the next page and I'll go, dang, I start thinking about other things and I forget what I read. And this started when I was really little. So in efforts to get me to enjoy reading, my dad was always a avid reader. He read all the time and he loved it, but he always wanted to share that with me, but I was never engaged enough to do it unless he read to me. I listened to a lot of audiobooks. That's fine. That works. And what he found really quickly is that when he read me comics, that's what got me engaged. And then all of a sudden I'm participating in the act of reading. I'm practicing. I'm actually getting better at it. And it like improved my school skills. Right. So, my dad, I had a really cool dad. He's younger dad. He had me when I was really young. So, he probably had me read things I shouldn't have read, to be honest. It got me into a lot of mature stuff, like horror types of things. He read me a lot of Stephen King growing up, the stuff that was like okay, but probably on the line. And then even in school, when there would be points where it's like, hey, we're gonna have a reading session for 20 minutes, he would give me graphic novels to read. And I remember the teachers being like, oh, you can't read that, Tom. And I'd be like, defiant. No. You can ask my dad. He said he wants me to read Hellblazer. He wants me to read this. And sure enough, some of those conversations got escalated to my dad to where he would go, no, I want him to read that. That's okay. Like I have permission. This is what I want him to read. And yeah, I mean, that's just really was my introduction to comics, was a lot of that. It didn't hurt that my dad was in the first nerd rock band growing up. When I was in the womb, he played drums in this band. So like as soon as I was born and could walk, I was around people playing music. I have a very musical family. I play guitar, drums. I used to be in like heavy metal types of bands in high school. I used to be the screamer in the band, do like the Cookie Monster voice, kind of stuff. And I used to play a lot of music with my dad. We covered a lot of Iron Maiden and System of a Down, things like that. And he was in this band growing up called Ookla the Mock, which is a band named after there's a lot of lore to it, but the bottom line is the songs were about the Enterprise. NCC 1701D is about Mr. Potato Head and Captain Kirk and Aquaman and superpowers and that's my cat, by the way. Shout out Comic Butch. He needs a little attention too. So there'll be a little bit of meows throughout this. I apologize in advance. He likes to hug the mic. But I would be around this music where these guys are singing about adamantium and Wolverine's claws and his healing factor. And, when you're like 6 years old, wanting to know about Wolverine and explaining the lyrics to a song, all of a sudden I'm learning about like historical Marvel lore, So it started then, and it clearly had left an impression long term. But that's how I got into comics. I also, Christmas time, my dad was part of a band. All of his homies would watch superhero shows. And, I grew up on Buffy the Vampire Slayer and things like that. So when it came time for Christmas, they bought me comic books and they bought me action figures, And I remember my favorite gifts growing up and I could always tell what they were was when you take, you know, you're like a action figure, it has like a cardboard and, you know, on one side and then the plastic on the other.
Yeah.
They would take both, they get me two action figures and they put them back to back to the cardboard and wrap it up. And I'm like, ooh, I got two action figures under the tree right there. And, you know, I would be playing with Batman and Robin and just anything, you know, like I was introduced to it at such a young age. So, um, you know, that's what started my love for it, but also it was a family thing too. You know, there's conventions that my dad will go to this day with my mom,
Mhm.
and they'll be in the comic section on their knees, getting dirtied up, hunting for books, buying. My mom will have a short box filled, just
Mhm.
filling runs, you know? So it's a whole family thing.
At what point do you say, I want to take my fandom and expand upon it with this YouTube channel?
Hmm. Well, it started with Instagram first because I just liked sharing and being part of the community. You know, I was always going to conventions and I was always on the hunt, and I have a lot of friends who dealt in comics. So it was just, you know, it's a hobby, yeah, but it's also kind of a lifestyle when you're really enjoying comics. And it just started with me wanting to share my Mignola collection. You know,
Mhm.
Hellboy was to this day is my favorite comic book, but also superhero. And I was just an avid Hellboy collector and I wanted to share it with people. I had a really cool wall in my home, and my goal was to have a Blue Label 9.8, a CGC Signature Series 9.8 of every book that I wanted to collect. So I had two of everything. And I got pretty close to having 9.8s of everything. Not all of them, but I got pretty close. And I just had an enjoyment of like, oh, I got this. And I know there's going to be friends of mine who also collect Mignola that are going to be excited to see it. But then also, if I put myself out there, I'm going to find more Mignola fans that are going to hit me up when they find something cool. And that's what started happening. All of a sudden, I'd get hit up and they're like, hey, yo, I got this book. And I know you have that. You want to do some trades? And are you familiar with Javon Jordan, Illuminati, the artist?
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, he's a great artist, and I know him before all the Comic Tom stuff. He knows me as just Tom, right? Or yeah, it's just Tom. And I met him because he found me on eBay and he
Mhm.
saw I was selling a Hellboy book that he wanted, realized I was in Washington, and we were at the time within like 30 minutes of each other. So we connected, and I'm like, oh, this is a really cool dude. He's a rapper, and you know, he does like horror rap, and I like hip hop. So I'm like, oh, this is a cool dude. He likes Migniola, and he lives 30 minutes away. And all of a sudden, we're connecting because of Hellboy. And I know if I need something, he may have it, or he may know where to get it. Or if I find myself with more than one copy, I'm looking to upgrade something, I can hit this guy up and see like, do you want this? And more times than not, he's like, hell yeah, dude, let's meet up and deal. So it kind of just started like that, just being part of the community. It would turn into what it is now after really me wanting to just kind of do this all the time. You know, it's I enjoy it so much that it's like, oh, damn, if there's an opportunity for me to make this not just a lifestyle choice, but like my profession,
Right.
that would be worth the risk. Like I don't want to think, oh, you know, I wish I would have done that one day. So it just there was a point where I was working and I took a part-time job, and I was thinking like, you know, if I can spend like an extra 10 hours a week just doing comic stuff. And the kind of stuff I did, I just helped out my LCSs. I got jobs listing for them, sorting for them, cleaning their bathrooms. Like I was doing whatever I could to just fill up that extra time I was allotted because yeah, I was working 10 hours less a week, but I also wasn't driving to my job to and from. And I also wasn't having to spend my lunchtime managed to work at a place for someone else. And I'm like, oh, that 10 hours actually translated to like 15 to 20 hours because comics are really fun. It doesn't feel like work. So all of a sudden, I'm like, oh, I'm pushing myself to work technically more, but also I kind of have my own time to do it because I was kind of like on contract, doing contract work. So I just kind of weaned off for a year and was like, all right, well, if I can do this with like a job 30 hours, and the only thing that's preventing me from going full time is figuring out how to pay for like my car and my insurance and my house, it turned into like, do I even want a car? Do I even need a house? Like, if I can do this full time and just live in the most affordable way If I have to eat ramen every day, would it be worth it? And I had those serious thoughts like every day, like, I think it would be because I would be happier. And I had an opportunity when the job that I was working at part time was purchased, and everybody lost their job. I got like a small severance and went on unemployment and was like, you know what? I'm just going to take this next year and I'm just going to do what I think would be the most fun, that would provide the most value to this industry that I enjoy being part of. And that's how the YouTube channel started. That was the point where I'm like, I'm just gonna start making YouTube videos and talking about things I like. And the idea was, I just want to make content for people that are my friends and people on the con floor that enjoy this. And maybe they'll listen to me while they're bagging and boarding. And that was the idea. Just like, I just want to make some content because I listen to people like Jim Mint and Comic Storian and Variant Comics and Comics Explained and Comic Tropes. All these guys, like, they're on my playlist. I'm watching them all day while I'm pricing and grading and listing and hunting and going into estate sales at 5:30 in the morning to beat everyone else out. And I'm like, all right, well, look, they're doing something valuable that I enjoy. Maybe I can do something too, but maybe more for the collectors. So that's how the YouTube channel started. And then just through experience and what I had to learn throughout that process, yeah, it just kind of became what it became. I realized there's certain areas that the community wanted. There were certain pieces of content that the community really enjoyed that I was decent at providing, and I could learn to do it better. And I just kept doing it, and I made it a job. I just woke up every single day and said, "This is what I have to do," without any without any guarantee that I could continue doing it. And my thinking was, hey, worst case scenario, I have to get a job and I just have to wake up really early to do this. And maybe one day I'll be able to do it full time. Maybe I'll never be able to do it full time, but I got to try. And that's how I got here.
I said, because with you, I mean, you do a lot of research for your shows, and you also, you work hard to present it in an entertaining way. I mean, someone could just sit there and be like, "Oh, this comics, da 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 da," but it's a way that you present it and stuff like that that sort of draws the audience in. Is that something that you worked on over time, or is that something that you figured out as you went along?
I think it's something I figured out as I went along, but it was because of how tough it was.
Mhm.
In the early days, I did what I could. I sold that Mignola collection I was just talking about.
Right.
That was the first thing that had to go. I sold it all. I put it into a new camera, microphone, the table I still use today, flash drives or SD cards to be able to save the footage, and a better computer with Adobe, and paying for Adobe monthly and Photoshop. And also, I don't know how to use any of this. So when I wasn't performing and prepping for a show, I was learning how to produce the show. I was learning how to edit and how to edit thumbnails and how to mess with audio and how to make it sound better. And there was an equal, if not more amount of time being spent on that, the training to get up to speed to be able to produce my vision. And throughout that time, it was a nightmare. You ever see that like Bill O'Reilly clip where he's like losing his mind on the mic, where he's like, F it, we'll do it raw. That whole thing? Yo, I can relate to that feeling.
Mhm.
There like back in the day, there'd be times where I'm 25 minutes in, and because my camera would shut off after 15 minutes because it just wasn't what I needed, I had to redo the whole thing.
Right.
And this is after hours of preparation. There's no money coming in. I'm doing what I can to just like to get by. And you're at hour 10 for the day and you just want to make something cool people are going to like. And at the time, I was lucky to have 1,000 views on a video. Like the first 1,000 followers was painstakingly difficult to acquire.
Mhm.
So, you know, that feeling of just like, oh man, like there's so much riding on this, and this stupid camera's not working, and it didn't autofocus, and the SD card's filled, so I got to remove it and put it on my computer, and I don't have space on my computer because I don't have enough memory on my computer because I just didn't think I needed it, but now I need it. And all of that compiles to, it doesn't matter when you're on the camera. The audience isn't going to know this. So when you get back to the table, you got to do what you can to just like bring it out of you to be the best and most entertaining person you can be, the host you can be. So all of a sudden I realized, you know what? I let that go, and I just really talk passionately about what I really enjoy and what I love. sometimes my hands start moving, and sometimes I get a little passionate and I start getting excited, and I think it's just like it comes out of me because yeah, it was at that time it was just difficult, and it was what I needed to kind of push through to get it done. And then yeah, over time, video after video, 1,000 videos later, yeah, I'm better now, and I can riff, and I can. And a lot of what I do is improv. I don't use a teleprompter. I tried using a teleprompter at first, but it didn't work. It didn't feel natural. I didn't care for it. I didn't want to write a script that I read.
Right.
So I was trying to figure out like what I enjoy doing mattered, like when I did a video and I didn't like making the video and I went through it all and it's like, yeah, I got views. But my biggest worry was, what if I did a video that was really tough to do and I didn't enjoy it, but that's what people wanted and that's what I had to do. And I'm over here trying to do something passionate. That's a huge problem to me because then all of a sudden I'm doing something that I have to do. And I don't want to make content like that. Like I want to be passionate because it's authentic. Because the people I watch, they love what they do. And if that's an opportunity, that's the lane I want to be in. Even if it gets views, I don't want to do those videos to just have to do them. So I just focused in on the ones like, you know what, I really enjoyed it. And when I really enjoy it, this is how I am on the mic and people like it. And then it just started a snowball effect. And all of a sudden, I'm like, I can do that again because I'm going to want to do it again. And then, over time, 7 years go by like it's been, which is kind of crazy. And people watch my stuff, which is really cool and humbling.
Was there a point that it clicked and you said, okay, I made the right choice? Like I know I can do this, and what I'm doing is reaching the audience.
No,
Okay.
no. What you're kind of describing measuring success, which is kind of it's subjective, right? And a lot of people measure business success. Have you heard like the marathon analogy before? It's like people think that success is like a marathon, but the big difference is like most people think it's like watching a marathon when it's not. It's like performing a marathon. And as someone who's never done a marathon, but I do work out, so I do understand certain parts of it.
Right.
If you're watching a marathon, and this is something I've heard, it's just a good analogy. If you're watching a marathon, you can see the beginning, you can see the middle, and you can see the ending. When that person gets to the end, they've accomplished the task and they hit that success metric. But that's not what it's like when you're making content and you're trying to make it successful. What it's actually like is you're running the marathon. It's sometimes 3, 4, 6 hours, and you're sweating. And as you're running, you're like convincing yourself with mind tricks to keep going. You're like, oh, I'm halfway to the halfway mark and a third of the way through that first mark. And then you get to that point, and you're like, I only got like this much left. And you're like tricking yourself along the way. The biggest difference, however, is that you don't know when you're going to cross the finish line when you're actually trying to make successful content or find success in a business plan that you're after and whatever endeavor it is. And also when you cross that finish line, which is subjective, there's no one cheering for you because you don't know when you're going to cross it, and it's subjective as mentioned. So no, there was never a point. And to this day, I don't even necessarily feel like that is a thing. Like I know a lot of people will go, "Oh, Tom is doing well," right? And I'm very grateful, and I know that there is a lot of success that I've experienced. Like we have a lot of wins, and I'm very proud of our work. But at my day to day, I don't live in that mode. I had a J. Scott Campbell video take off, and that's fantastic. And we got hundreds of followers in a day, and it's a new day. And there's a new bit of content. There's another book to talk about. There's another creator to collab with. And it's just, what's the next thing and the next thing and the next thing.
I mean, 10 years from now, what do you want to see yourself doing? The show still, or expanding into, because you are expanding into collaborations with comics and stuff like that. Do you see that being the future?
Yes. I really, the future is whatever I'm enjoying the most to do. So for me, I've been doing the trending video every week on YouTube for 6 years this year.
Mhm.
6 years, or we're going into our seventh year. I don't know. Time, right? The Hot 10 is going on 5 years. These are videos I do every single week. You know, my weekend is dominated by these videos, regardless of if I'm at a wedding, if I am sick. Now, granted, I do have help now, but I didn't always have help. And these videos aren't easy to produce. So there was a lot of training to be able to like be able to pass the baton to some other people to be able to give me some relief. So now, fortunately, I got that. If I need Ryan to help me out, he's going to help me out. But that's new. Um, but I really enjoy those videos. Like I freaking love it, man. There is there is not one part of me that is dreading going on the mic to talk about a Mark Spears cover right now. There's no part of me that's like, oh, Joshua Williamson has a new G.I. Joe coming out, and I have to read that, and I have to talk about it, and I have to reach out to Joshua to see what he's got to say, because maybe he can tell me something. You know, like it's like it's a job, I guess, but man, it's freaking fun, and I enjoy every second of it. And you know, prior to this call, I was grading and pricing books and pressing books. Like there's a book on the press right now.
Right.
Um, and there's a stack of books that need to be worked on. And it's what I would do no matter what. You know, if I was working another job, I would do this in between and sometimes on the clock, probably. You know? But like long term, just whatever I find the most enjoyment is what I'm going to do. And it could be the trending, it could be the hot 10. I really enjoy working with creators. That's definitely something over the last year I have found a liking to. I've kind of hit a good stride with that. J. Scott Campbell, Todd McFarlane, John Boy Myers, Johnny Desjardins examples. Um, I really enjoyed making comics, you know, writing a comic book. It was very difficult, but I can see myself doing more of that. I also enjoy producing and camera work and cinematography. So maybe I'll get into that a little bit too. My main goal, you know, as Comic Tom 101 or whatever this turns out to be, is to get as many people into comics as possible. Because whenever people get into comics, they freaking love it. And I've seen that happen so many times, and it's life changing for a ton of people. So if I can be like a beacon for that, then whatever gets the most people into comics, that's what I'm going to do.
When you go to cons, do you see 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds picking up comics as much as, guys our age, guys a little younger and older? Do you see younger folks getting involved, or is that something that comic industry really needs to sort of reach out and pull them in a little bit more?
I mean, we could always be doing more, I think,
Mhm.
but I do see it.
Right.
Um, you know, whenever there's a young fan, it's a totally different experience, you know, like Noah's Amazing Reviews. Shout out Noah. This kid is one of the most talented. I think he's like 11 now, 12 years old. But I met him when he was under 10, and he was like, Comic Tom, do you think this is a VF? I don't know. And it was like, it blew my mind. And I'm like, oh, wait, I need to stop everything I'm doing. And I need to just go through this box of comics with Noah. And I need to make sure he gets the book he wants to get. And I need to experience this because this is a special moment. Like, this is the next gen. And it's super important that we have more Noahs in the community. And they don't have to be, you know, mini celebrities in their own right like he is, because he's a super talented youngster. But yeah, we need more young people into comics for sure. And I do see it though. Like there's a lot of like father son, mother daughter, like family uh comic collectors that go to cons for sure. But yeah, like it's probably the most important thing that we need to work on in this industry, in my opinion, is to bring more in.
What do you think is driving the market right now? Is it because for a long time it was the MCU, it's the DCU, who's going to be showing up in these films? Seems a lot more now it's covers, who's doing what. What do you think is going to be the future of driving the market?
Mm. The future of driving the market, like to grow it, is that what
Well,
you're
as
asking?
as far as what's collectible at this point, what's worth money, and what's sort of because
Oh, that's a really tough question. I think the things that are going to drive the market are things that always have, you know, supply and demand and what's happening in theaters and on television. I mean, those are all going to be the major things that'll happen. Comics are a great medium for storyboarding essentially to bring things to a larger production because it's cheaper than creating a book and it's cheaper than creating a cartoon. So a lot of those things are going to be it's just the same, it's all the same, but I think we're seeing a diversification of how they're being created and how they're being sold that is going to also offer some unique opportunities for collectibles to be created. My number one selling book in 2024. Do you want to guess what IP it was? I sell a lot of comic books, but
Yeah.
I'll tell you, it's like an exclusive comic.
Right.
I work with Marvel, DC, and Boom, and Dynamite, and
Right.
I've done work with Scout Comics and Aftershock and things like that. So, like, do you want to guess? You can just guess the publisher, even, or just the IP.
Um,
Throw it
Image.
out there. Image, right? You think like
Right.
maybe like Transformers, right?
Right.
Or G.I. Joe. I've done those books, I had
Mhm.
Raf Grassetti on a Transformers. It was one of the best-selling Transformers books of that run.
Right.
My single best-selling comic book was Concrete Jungle by Bad Omens the band.
Hmm.
This was released by Massive Publishing.
Right.
That was never even mentioned on my YouTube channel. I'm talking about Spider-Man Weekly, and
Right.
I'll release Spider-Man comics. And my biggest seller last year wasn't even a comic book that you probably even knew. Because when mainstream gets involved in any level, it creates comic fans. And that right there is one of the biggest opportunities and probably missed opportunities because if you have mainstream people of influence,
Mhm.
musicians or just in general creators, like, you know, uh, just like people who are in movies that cross over and make a comic, like there's so much opportunity within that because they're bringing in a different fandom. And when we are able to grow the comic base, those people who enjoy the Bad Omens covers, they go, oh, damn, you got a Dan Quintana cover? I like Dan Quintana on this comic. Wait, Dan Quintana did a superhero that I recognize or my kid likes. And all of a sudden now they kind of get roped in. And then all of a sudden they're like, man, I really like Dan Quintana. And it's this avenue of it's not just Spider-Man that brings them in. It could be a few IPs removed, let alone it could just be an artist that brings them in, which is why variant comics is such a big opportunity for getting more people into comics because you have so many artists outpouring creativity into our marketplace cover by cover, and those individual artists start to create a fandom as well that gets people into titles.
Do you think the variant covers, though, it's tough for collectors because if you're a completionist and you want to get, you know, all the covers of a certain book, some are very difficult to come by at times. What are your thoughts on the variant covered boom that we're seeing right now?
Well, I think that as far as like if you're a completion, I mean, how many completionists do you know?
Right.
Not very many of them.
Right.
Like, I mean, back in the day, I'm sure. And if you're looking to complete a run of Amazing Spider-Man, how many people, when they say, oh, I'm an ASM, I'm trying to complete my run, are they actually trying to complete their run? Are they trying to get 1 through 200? You know what I mean? Or 1 to 300 or 1 to 4. You know what I mean? Like there's caveats to it.
Right.
And if you're looking to complete, let's say, an entire event of something coming out, well, there's like 22 different crossovers that happen. So if you tally all that up, yeah, it gets pretty expensive and it's tough. But that's not like Marvel's releasing that to make a great story, something that you can really dive into and they can hopefully get you on board for it, an entire event. Like that's why there's all these covers. And obviously, more units and more units that can sell, etc. I personally think that the variant market is the foundation of everything we enjoy in comic books right now. And without the variant market, we would be in a very tough situation because comics has never really been in a prosperous time. There's been ebbs and flows, and we can look at sometimes as potentially better than others. But even like in the 90s, there was a point where we're like, oh, damn, comics are great. And then we look back just a year after that point and going, oh, actually, it wasn't great. And then it kind of gets a little bit better, but then it's not good. And then publishers just downsize how many comics are coming out. And then this company goes out of business, and then this company sells. Like there's always ebbs and flows to comics.
Mhm.
And that's because comics as a medium doesn't really make sense to exist without people like us who actually enjoy reading things over time. And by being able to offer that opportunity to read something over time, it means that you can help fund a comic idea without having to have the whole thing completed at first. If you can say, all right, you have 6 issues of a comic book, and that's going to be a graphic novel.
Mhm.
And let's say I'm throwing a number out there as someone who actually has made a graphic novel that's like 4.5, almost 5 issues long.
Mhm.
It costs like what, 60 to 80,000, depending on how much you're actually going to put into the comic. Like how many variants, how you have writers, you have artists, you have inkers, and most, by the way, most of the artists don't make any money, right?
Right.
Like if you're doing an independent thing, you mostly do it as a passion, but you have to pay the artist, you got to pay the editor, you got to pay the inker and the letterer, the
Mhm.
cover artists, the people who are going to market the book. You got to put it in previews. That costs money. Like it ends up being quite expensive. Most IPs don't have just a access of cash flow to be like, you know what, let's just gamble $100,000 today and hope that this comic's going to work. But if you break it off month by month and people find value to reading it monthly, collecting it monthly, enjoying it monthly, maybe they even buy more than one cover because they like it. Well, now they're investing twice before the thing even ends. And by the way, how many comics get canceled? So there isn't any guarantee that this is actually going to make it long term. You know, hopefully it does and people enjoy it. And that's why there's like a high bar to what we enjoy. But um, I think the variant aspect allows that to have a better odds of actually getting to the end goal of you have a full story now.
Right.
So, and then also you have store exclusives and you have ratio variants. I mean, stores largely don't make that much money off comics. The stores that I know that I go to regularly, comics is like a percentage of what they rely on. And if anything, it's kind of a loss leader. Like most of the time it brings people in, but they got to sell the toys. They got to sell the slabs. They got to sell the original art, the pop toys, you know, like all these other things. And it's like more of a boutique style. And it's really tough to make just a straight up subscription comic store successful in the United States. It's like, especially when any store has a upwards of 90% likelihood of failure rate after 12 months.
Right.
So if you can have a incentive to buy 10 copies of a book that 8 people ordered, but you know what? If I get that 1 in 10, it may go for $10, which makes me get 10 more dollars than I otherwise wouldn't, which actually pays 50% of the bill off of that one title. You know what? I'll give that crash down number 1 a chance. So it makes sense to do it, you know, but it costs money to do that too. On the other side of things, you know, that creative team has to go, let's make a cover now. We got to pay for that. We got to print that. And it's going to come out of the bottom line. We're going to make less money, but the stores will be able to make more money and then they'll give us a shot. And hopefully the story's good enough that they'll want to keep getting it on issue 2, 3, and 4, etc.
I want to jump a little bit to your writing. And when you're coming up with an idea, do you have a beginning and an end point set? Or do you have a beginning point set and you want to see where it's going to go before, you hit the end of it?
I've only done this one time.
Right.
So I kind of learned, I mean, I read a lot of books before, as soon as I learned like, okay, as soon as I found out I can make a comic, this is going to happen. Like I got to get good at this. I can't, it can't be crap. Like, oh my gosh, if I release a crappy comic and I make all these covers and I team up with David Mack on a cover and people go, this is just dog crap. Like that's a lot of risk. Like think about it. Like I do this for a living. I love it. And oh my gosh, I do not want to stain on my reputation. And also I don't want people to pay $4 on something and feel like they got robbed, So it's got to be good.
Right.
And I have a living legend doing the art. So it better be damn good. Like I want to make it so that he's doing something he's proud of, shout out Ben Templesmith. So what it naturally became was what you just said. Like, nah, man, my brain, the way it worked is like, I think of the scenes first. I had the idea of what I thought would be cool. And a lot of those ideas were formed by knowing Ben Templesmith's art style. And then also, I only want to do things I enjoy doing. Right. And what I really enjoy is horror, sci-fi, like body horror, I
Mhm.
like the alien coming out, the xenomorph, emerging from the chest, crazy stuff. I like a lot of, I'm a fan of the Saw movies and cinematography. Like, how do they do that? I enjoy that.
Mhm.
So that's what I'm focusing in on. It's like, all right, well, I'm going to scratch that creative itch, like, oh, I really like that movie. How would I have done that differently?
Mhm.
And I come up with the idea, the larger idea of like, okay, what's like the character development? What are some of the cool beats that maybe we can do? And then I start thinking about the scenes like, oh, all right, well, if we can have this powerful scene between two people take place and it's gripping, and it's a little, can we swear on your channel, by the way?
Sure.
A little fucked up. Like, oh,
Right.
this is a messed up scene. Like, I have it in my head. Like, I want someone to go, ugh, that's dark. Like, okay, that's going to make them feel something. And comics are about escapism. If you can get someone to check out for like 12 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, because they're maybe going to read it twice, like, that's the best example of enjoying a comic book, especially if you only have one issue. And if you can come up those beats, those moments where you're like, oh, damn, that's just comic books, man. Like it only happened here. So I start thinking about those moments myself and then I build around it. All right, well, that's going to take two people and they got to be in love. They got to be people we want to root for. We don't want this to happen to that person. So I'm going to backtrack. And then I'm like, all right, well, then what are ways to communicate that feeling where you make them likable? And then all of a sudden you start creating narratives around it. And then you do the rough draft, and
Right.
that rough draft is it's rough, but then you kind of go through it again and again. And fortunately for me, I did this with one of my best friends where we riff all the time. Ryan and I have been making content on YouTube for 7 years, and our content is largely improv. Yeah, we report on some numbers, et cetera, but like it's largely improv. So we have a lot of examples of just like going back and forth, seeing what sticks. And that's kind of what the comic book became. It's like I would come up with an idea, maybe he would come up with an idea, and by the end of it, we wouldn't even know who came up with it because it's so distorted and different. And then when you add Ben Templesmith to it, it's like, yeah, we think it's going to look like this. And he goes, yeah, guys, this sounds good, but watch this. And he'll take that view and then he'll be like, but if it's like this, and he'll flip it like it's 4D. And we're like, oh, shoot, that's awesome. And then you get an editor involved and they're like, yeah, but you know what? What if you just change the page sequences and put it out of order and you tell it in that way? And they're like, oh, okay. And then it becomes a combined effort. And then, yeah, we're in charge of it all. We're approving everything, but it's definitely a group mentality to make it the coolest it could be.
When you're creating a character, where does the blueprint start? Is it a physical look? Is it an ability the person has, a characteristic, their personality? Where do you start to build from?
Mm. When I'm making a new character, I mean, I guess the main thing is like, we, the first thing is like figuring out who like the lead character was, right? Like, who do we want on covers? Who do we want to have the character development by the end of the story that you think differently about them in some way, good or bad? So I would say like that's the first thing. And then you kind of expand within whatever the world was. So for us, wait, we're taking a group of people. If you haven't read Crashdown, like take a group of people, and certain other individuals, put them on a ship and send them into another planet because they can't live on Earth anymore. And this is like our last ditch effort to like populate a new planet, right? To keep human civilization going. That was the idea. So then it's like, okay, well then you're not just going to send down an entire civilization. You're going to send a scout mission. You want to make sure that this is where you want to go because there's got to be a plan B to this, like you can't just like risk human civilization. So then it turns into, all right, well, there's going to be a group of people. Who are these groups of people? How do they know one another? And then it just kind of evolves from there. And since it's comics, we can have fun with it. I made one of the characters. I'm like, oh, we're gonna name him Davis, give him long hair because I have a friend named Davis. I think it'd be fun to kill him in my comic book. Um, I named one of the characters Rosa. That's after my grandma. It's kind of like, okay, well, this character, I'm gonna name her after my grandma. I think it would be kind of cool, like as a tribute to her.
Mhm.
And my grandma's Puerto Rican, barely spoke any English.
Right.
So like, let's just actually have her be Puerto Rican. I'm Puerto Rican. It'd be really cool to be able to show my family on the island, like, hey, I'm gonna send you comics, but like this character in particular, it's named after the Rosa. Like this is grandma. Like this is somebody you guys all know. It's like that's a personal thing. No one else knows, but I know. And it makes it easy to then start riffing off of like, well, then who is this character? And I start thinking of like, all right, well, who would this character be? And it's like, yeah, there's like a little bit of influence of like just my own personal like this is who this character could be like. Some people are kind of based off of like fictional characters that I enjoy. Like, what if this person existed that I like from this show in this world? And I'm not gonna like rip off the character's look. I'm not gonna rip off what they say, but like maybe how they talk, maybe like their how they think could be similar. Maybe they're really quick to shoot a gun, because they're just like that, like, okay, well then how would they talk? How would they react to situations? And all of a sudden, you just start building the world. And it just takes a lot of time. What I realize is like I start thinking about it all the time. And then I take a lot of notes. I pull up a notepad. I just start jotting stuff down. Like, oh, it would be cool if this character, when he experienced this, he started having some like level of like PTSD from it. Like, this is some like hardcore stuff. And these people, they can't all just be like, we're ready to take on anything. Like, no, we need a character that's just like literally unstable right now because he just experienced something. So I'm thinking of like movies where you kind of experience that sadness that character portrayed in cinema, and you can kind of like maybe sympathize with it.
Mhm.
Some people can empathize with it. And then yeah, you start world building, and it's a lot of fun, and it just takes time.
Let's say, I mean, because you have all these ideas. How was it self-editing to say, like, okay, I have this big, like a movie set in my head of what I want to do. How do I narrow it down to fill the spaces I need to fill?
Scheduling,
Okay.
mostly. Just like we gotta like, hey, Ryan, we're getting together. We got to get all this other stuff done. We got to get the training video done. We got to get the editor the information he needs. We need to do the research on this book. We got a creator coming in. For the next 3 hours, though, everything gets put aside. The phones get turned off. We are in crash down mode. And sometimes we're drinking, Sometimes we're smoking a little bit. We're
Mhm.
having fun, we're getting into the world, and we're literally like, I should have recorded some of these things, but it's a little embarrassing. But there are scenes in that book where I'm like, I start to get it, and he's like, "Oh, you're cooking, Tom. Keep going." And I'm like, "Okay, but hold on." He's got his shirt off. And I take my shirt off, and and then I'm in my kitchen. I'm like, pretend the kitchen, the freezer door is the door that's gonna get knocked down. I open the door. I'm like, imagine this is what it looks like, and we're reenacting how Ben would draw it, at least how we think we'll want him to draw it. He may draw it differently, but like, if you can see it from this angle, and I'm going, no, we don't want this. And then the person does this, and you're the person. So stand over there. And like, we're reenacting this shit. And it's like, it's silly, and it doesn't even translate 100%. And we may throw the idea out entirely in 20 minutes, but we think we're cooking. I mean, it's just, you start doing it. You start living it. You're like, I'm this character. This is, how would you say this? How would this conversation work? And I'm like, Ryan, start saying what you want to say. And I'm like, well, this is how this person would talk. And maybe Rosa's in the back going, you need to shut the hell up. That's not gonna, and we're just trying. We're just throwing it out there, and we're taking notes as we go. And yeah, it's so much fun. Like, it's silly, and it's definitely not something I want a third. Like, if there was another person in that room, I don't know if it would be as authentic. Like, you may start thinking, oh, what are they going to think about me, kind of thing. But like, now I know if I had a third person in the room, I'd be like, buckle up. It's going to get weird in here. You may be one of our, what is it? Like on a set, you have people who are just stand-ins. Like, they don't do
Yeah.
anything besides, what's the name of that? I'm spacing
The
right.
extras.
Yeah, you may just be an extra in the scene. You're the tree. Stand there. But because literally we're thinking of like there's a part in issue 4 where we open up where, like, the whole thing is about the destination. I don't want to spoil it too much. The graphic novel does come out in a couple months, but I will say they do crash down, right? Like, it's the name of the book is Crash Down. But like, there are scenes where we tell out of order. So you're going to find out something that you thought you'd get at the very end, at the beginning of one of the issues, which means we got to know what we want to show them and how we want to show them in the beginning, so that at the end, it's the continuity's right. So that means that they got to land in a certain way. And how would we get them to land in a certain way? And some of this is like, for example, I really liked what it looked like, because we have our characters have these helmets, right? And there's really signature looking helmets with like this cool mesh around their neck, kind of futuristic Ben Templesmith sci-fi shit. And I really liked what it looked like when someone was so badly injured that blood was just coming out the bottom of the helmet, like a stream like this. And I just couldn't stop thinking about that. And Johnny Desjardins, one of the artists on a bunch of the covers, he threw out there like, hey, what, like, spikes. There's spikes on the tentacles. There's tentacles. It's a Lovecraftian hellscape where they go. Spoiler. And there's spikes on the tentacles. And he's like, "Do the spikes come off?" And I'm like, "Yeah, they do come off, but I haven't actually seen it visually yet." So he's like, "Would it look like this?" And I'm looking at these spikes as if it was like a porcupine.
Yeah.
We know they, and they're just sitting in you. So I'm like, "Oh, it's like it's just, it's horrific." Like, imagine if a spike's going through a helmet, what's got to go on inside the helmet?
Right.
And I said Lovecraftian, like that's the whole point, is like you have to build that up in your head, and comics are a great way to do it. You don't have to show it. You gotta like imagine what it's like inside that helmet if that's what's happening. So I'm thinking, how do we have that scene happen? And we're gonna show it here, but we got to end there, which means that they got to be in certain positions, and how is the monster, whatever happens, how does it lead to them being in that position that we want them to be? Because that's gonna be the most gripping part, is when you stop and go, "Damn, that's gruesome and that's cool," and you're sitting there reading this going, "Man, what's it got to be like under that helmet?" And I just kept getting caught up in those moments.
I want to ask a little bit about these creator-owned projects because I mean, on social media, you can't go anywhere without a Kickstarter or something coming up. Someone, either someone who's a professional or an amateur creating their own books. I think that's wonderful, but it's becoming very inundated with these books. What would your advice to be to someone? How do you make your book stand out in a very crowded market?
Like if you're doing a Kickstarter,
Yeah,
hmm, the first, I mean, it all depends on what your budget is.
right.
And that budget is going to determine what you are able to do. And if you have a small budget, then you got to do some grassroots stuff. You got to put your money into something that is going to be exciting, save up for just the right artist to back it. Um, you don't need, I mean, if you look at like one of the kings of doing Kickstarters, like Coffin Comics, Brian Polito, shout out. Dude's a brilliant person. You're going to see a ton of covers, and you're going to see variants of the covers, and you're going to see add-ins, and you're going to have projects that you can back at $1,000 and get 20 different things, and it's going to be awesome. And people do it, and you build up that community, and you can do that. But like, that's a big business that's doing this all the time, who have scaled Kickstarter after Kickstarter to be able to fund those kind of things. So there are Kickstarters that thrive off of just a couple different covers, and you get those artists to do it. And I think that you have to stress about that. You got to make the cover and the story intriguing enough and potentially collectible enough and exciting enough that if you only have a little bit that you can do, that you can at least garner some interest. I think being realistic about your business plan is pretty important. Like, realistically, what would be a level of success for you? Is it just getting it made? Because if just getting it made so you have product that you can print at an affordable rate so you can go to conventions to try to introduce your story to people is the only bar, which is it is the bar mostly for independent creators. Like, I didn't get paid for Crashdown. I didn't get $1 to write Crash. I did it for free. Same with Ryan. Like, we got something out of it. We got a book that we can sell. We got, we got backed by Whatnot Publishing, who helped fund the book and the project, but like, we didn't get paid as a writer, right? Because most writers don't get paid. It costs money to make these things. But if you have like a realistic goal of it, then it's just about allocating the funds in the right way that you are able to get from the backing of said project to make it the biggest event and launch you can possibly do. And probably if it's like on one side of it, like you're trying to do it and it's very grassroots and you're just trying to get one issue out. You're just trying to give them a taste. There are people that I know that have done that with a small funding on a Kickstarter, because you can pay and find people to do the work at a respectable rate, but like, you're going to get some people who are going to be able to be a little bit more affordable. But you know what? They'll do the colors. They'll do the inks and stuff, and they won't be super competitive, like as far as, or in the market. You may not be able to go up against Daniel Warren or something like that, but like it's something. And as long as you're proud of the work, it's the bar, whatever that bar is. If you can achieve that bar, then you have the product, and then it turns into getting that out there to the community.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of examples of how people do it. And that would be my recommendation, is to get obsessive about what people are doing to make it work. Because there's a lot of independent creators that they don't have anything anyone new, but it took off enough. And there's a reason why it took off enough, because they teamed up with the right artists, or maybe the story was like compelling enough that people are like, oh, I'm gonna check this out. Or maybe there's someone like me who provides value in a completely different way.
Mhm.
And you're like, you know what? That guy provides value in this way. So I want to get that comic book. But let's remove me out of it. Let's say someone like Moist Critical, Charlie. Some people might not even know who he is, but he's a giant YouTuber.
Mhm.
He made a comic book called God Slap. It's about people like, like the slapping competitions. It's about a dude who can slap you and your head can explode. And he teamed up with Vincenzo Riccardi. They made a low print run on a book, and his audience was like, granted, he's got a giant audience, sure. But also his audience are not comic collectors or readers, but they were down to back it because he provides value in another way.
Right.
And I think of like Swaggelhaus. He made his own comic book. I don't think he's ever written a comic book prior to the one that he made.
Mhm.
But he provides value in a completely different way weekly, and people backed it, Reggie collects. I'm glad he's making more content on YouTube, but he made The Isolation, and he provides value in one way, and then he made an independent comic book. So like there's a lot of ways to go about it, but it's about providing value, but also being realistic about your business plan. What I will say is the ones that don't typically work out are the ones that never made a business plan to begin with.
I was talking to Jeff Vaughn from Gemstone just about, with these books out there, how do you value them? How do you say this book is worth X besides what's on the cover? How do you think that's going to go in the future? Are any of these books have the potential to become keys? And for you on your side, how would you know what to value these books at? Because it's kind of hard to tell just based off sales and the popularity.
Like if it's like a Kickstarter or an indie book.
Right.
Well, the first thing that this is actually one of the very first things I was pretty passionate about in trying to steer the community right, was noticing Kickstarter books that were open to order that were selling for more than cover price that you can buy off the creator's website, and the creators enjoying the pricing. I won't say who it was. I don't want to knock anyone. This is years ago. So like they've learned from this, but if you want to make a collectible, you got to make it collectible, and it's got to be an ethical collectible endeavor. So a big part of it is, what is the print count? Is it available, or is it open to order? If I could just go back to press on the same book over and over again, you shouldn't be paying more than cover price. Go to the website and buy it there for $5 or $4. That would be the first thing. Most have figured out that is not a thing to do, right? Like there's a couple independent comics in the last 7 years I've covered where I'm like, hey guys, don't spend $30 on eBay. Here's the listing. It's open to order. But they made an ash can that was limited to 500. That's what you should buy, right? Because it's limited to 500. There always is risk in all this. You're assuming people are going to do things right? And there's not always people who, not everyone does that, but also comic collectors are some of the most savvy and smart collectors in any collectible industry. We're talking about a medium where people take the time to like hold a comic like this on the con floor for 5 minutes to see if there's a spine tick in the corner that's color breaking, and to decide if they're going to spend $30 or $100 more on it. Right. Like people are savvy. They just have to be informed. And that's one of the jobs I take on, is to try to inform as much as possible. So yeah, there's always going to be some risk, but like really what it comes down to is it's all chance. You're taking risks. There's new comics that come out every day, and 99% of comics aren't worth anything. Sure. It's the ones that break through, that hit option status. And really what it turns into is creators' traction in the community and what their track record is. Right. Now, if I make another comic book, the odds of that book being optioned is just as low as Crashdown being optioned, which is very low. I'm not going to lie to you. It could happen. Yeah. That's probably not going to happen, right? But if it did, it'd be really exciting. Right. But also, if it got optioned, it doesn't mean it's actually going to happen. It doesn't mean that you should go spend a ton of money on the books, because like it's got to go through stages and stages before it actually does do something. However, if James Tynion has something that's new, he's got a track record. And he's also outspoken about it. You can sign up to Tiny Onion, and and get his newsletters and find out that he just went to Europe and had a conversation. I don't remember if it was Europe, but he just went somewhere and he's talking about the Sick Tick script and he has it in hand. He showed you a picture of it. So like that gives you more optimism on that independent comic book. So it's about doing your due diligence, but long term, I mean, it's all the same. There's probably going to be even more opportunity within it because there's so much market change and there's so many people who are kicking things off with like smaller publishers and independent stuff that, you know, there's who would have thought Toxic Avenger was going to be back on the screen, you know? Like I used to be a dollar bin book for me.
Yep.
Now look at what 9/8 are doing. And you got Peter Dinklage. Like that's going to be cool as shit. So like you never know. And I think that's also one of the fun parts about comics is that it starts to dive into like your own taste. You know, you start really, if you start reading comics, you can kind of spot out like, ooh, this could be a movie. Like, this could be really cool. And then that's all. And then it's like you kind of understand a foreign language. You know, you can kind of see through and go, you know what? Are you surprised that something that's killing the children may end up on Netflix one day? No. If you read it, you're going to go, damn, no, Erica Slaughter could be a household name. Absolutely.
And we are back. Such a nice guy. And you can see all the work that goes into making his channel what it is. He checks statistics. He does all these different things to give you the information you need about comics. It's really cool to hear his side of things because it makes it seem so easy, but it truly isn't. And that comic he's writing, very cool premise. If you like sci-fi, you like horror, he blends the two together very well. I can't wait to talk to him more about that down the road. So, Tom, thank you so much for taking the time. I'd love to talk to you again. And guys, thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful weekend. Next week, if you are a fan of Svengoolie, you're going to be very happy. That's all I got to say. All right. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week.